Is Across the Spider-Verse good? Well, Into the Spider-Verse was a punchy, powerful, poignant, Peter Parker-infused production, and Across the Spider-Verse is more of the same. So that's an easy question to answer. A slightly more impossible question to answer would be, which one is better? So let's answer it. This feels impossible because the quality of the art, design, cinematography, action, sound, music, characters, and story are all consistent across both movies. Yes, that was a pun. Speaking of, let's dive into Across the Spider-Verse a bit since I've only recently seen it and haven't discussed it on the channel yet. Spider-Verse 2, like its predecessor, is as stylish as always, mixing action with visual storytelling with the expertly chosen songs in a way that reminds me what it was like to be young and dream stuff up purely out of a desire to make cool, fun shit. It's just creativity, and there are few creations nowadays that do things this way. The action as a whole is, of course, unbeatable, even among other animations. I previously mentioned that you simply cannot do in live action what you can in an animation, even if you can make the whole thing CG, and if you asked why, I would point you to this film. It's not that you can't CG everything, it's that CG is still operating within the constraints of a live action film, whereas in an animation, you have no such constraints, so you're free to push the boundaries of what's possible and real much further. Much like other aspects of the film, the action is at once more ambitious and maybe a tad excessive. The fast-paced zaniness on display definitely encourages multiple viewings, which is great value, but at the same time, as a first watch, some of this stuff might go over some people's heads simply because it's too fast-paced, or because the environment is becoming increasingly cluttered, like with the paper vulture, on top of which you throw more dimensional graffiti effects and more characters on screen at any one time, and the comic book text, and it's impressive, but it's quite a lot. That's what she said. Comparatively, Into the Spider-Chorus still has the zaniness, but its action scenes are tighter, easier to follow, and the added simplicity compared to its successor, only when compared to its successor, actually makes the fights and stunts that much more brilliant. By the way, public service announcement. If you haven't seen the alternate universe cut of Into the Spider-Verse, I warmly recommend it. In addition to a ton of extra scenes that flesh out the characters and the universe more, there's just something interesting about seeing a work in progress coming to life before your very eyes. You're welcome. Brought to you by Sony. By the way, number 2, if the races were reversed, you know they'd be shouting,
"I like the fine-ass black woman like that."
But that's okay, I'm cool with it. Help yourself to all the white booty you want, dog. Okay, Spider-Verse, I know you like your comic book nostalgia, but do not, for the love of gods, make me read text during a frantic action scene. My attention deficit hyperdyslexia will kick in, and instead of looking at things on a screen, I'll end up looking at the screen itself, or through it rather. Films and animations shouldn't actually be comics, small retro touches notwithstanding, so don't let retro nostalgia cloud your judgment, young Jedi. On a storytelling front, acceptance of identity seems to be the theme this time around. Gwen's dad can't accept her as Spider-Gwen, forecasting a similar situation for Miles and his parents. And on a broader storytelling perspective, the movie itself seems to have a problem with Miles' identity since he isn't supposed to be what he is. And considering how obsessed I am with fatalistic stories where people try to mess with fate, I very much like the direction this movie's headed. And on the topic of Gwen, she's a cool way to retell the classic Spider-Man origin story, with Gwen's version being perhaps even more heartbreaking, because it's not some random reporter who's out to get her, it's her own father.
My job is to capture your person's universe on this piece of paper.
That's blank.
Exactly. I have no idea who this kid is.
I like this woman. I mentioned in a previous video that I don't really feel like Miles Morales as a character is terribly well defined in the first film and that there's room for improvement there. And it seems the filmmakers agree with me because they decided to make this the central question that the Verse trilogy intends to answer. Slowly, painfully, adagio, as in the style of a sloth. For the movie quite literally calls into question Miles' justification for existing as a character in what I feel is a slightly meta way. Unfortunately, that's really where the analysis ends because, as I said, that's the main thesis of the trilogy, which will obviously be answered in the final installment, which is far from out as of the recording of this video. But it's a clever thing to tackle and I'd have probably done the same. If you think about it, there aren't many alternate versions of superheroes that are beloved or even well tolerated. The mere mention of Batwoman is liable to make the entire Bat family uncomfortable at the dinner table, while the 4 fucking Robins are, let's face it, interchangeable for the most part, and the litany of alternate Batman, Iron Man, and Captain Americas never really caught on for the obvious reason that they're just random cunts who appropriated a title and costume rather than a Bruce Wayne, a Tony Stark, and a Steve Rogers, who were carefully and deliberately conceived from the ground up to fit those superhero personas. So turning the Spider-Averse trilogy into a dissertation on why Miles Morales deserves to be his own distinct version of Spider-Man for reasons other than misguidedly trying to appeal to ethnic minorities is very much spanking the elephant in the room as opposed to ignoring it. It's a bold decision, unless it backfires. Then it's a terrible decision. And you might say that you need no justification to put anyone in a Spidey suit, because the whole point of the character is that anyone can be Spider-Man. Yeah, I know, Batman fans claim the same thing about their hero, which is a shit rationale that I've already addressed here. Now you might also say that all the meta Miles justification stuff I just babbled about is not really a thing and only exists in my head, but look at it this way. Shut up. Speaking of catering to minorities, if you want to do something special, tasteful for the minorities, this is how you do it. You simply showcase their culture, instead of going political and prating on and on about oppression and perceived victimization or lack of privilege. Play their music, speak their language, tell their jokes. Let their idiosyncrasies speak for themselves.
Are you, Oh, this? We don't know the sex yet. My husband wants it to be a surprise. He's really corny.
In terms of character development, Miles is still a character trying to find his development, the hope being that by the end of this entire thing he'll finally fucking establish himself as more than just the new kid on the block, or the anti-MacGuffin that this film turns him into. That final plot twist, which I won't spoil in case some of you haven't seen the movie yet, does present some interesting opportunities for this character going forward. However, it also kind of spells out the resolution. If Miles is an anomaly, then he can do things that other Spider-Men can't, and thus both have his cake and eat it, a metaphor the film actually alludes to at one point, which I'm not against, but it would have to be done really fucking well to merit such an ending. And even if it isn't, the movie merits some points for tackling the monumental task of trying to deconstruct the monolithic Spider-Man story and seeing what makes it tick, to see if a father figure must always die in order for a man to be a Spider-Man. I made a big fuss about why Spider-Man should strive to keep his secret identity secret because there are consequences to telling people you're Spider-Man, and I also praised No Way Home for acknowledging the sacrifices that make this hero possible, so it'll be interesting to see the Spider-Verse series either also confirm this, offer a viable alternative, or crash and burn in the most gruesome way possible. Either way, it'll be entertaining to watch. I will say the movie is more ambitious on a thematic level than in any other, as they're trying to weave together acceptance of the self with fatalism, and for the most part it succeeds in tying all of this together. Miles and Gwen are both haunted by the thoughts of their parents not accepting who they really are, and what they really chose to do with their lives, and in the case of Miles, that's blown to cosmic proportions as the whole plot seems to, like me, question his entire validity as a character, confronting him with the possibility that A, he's a fuck up and things might be better without him, B, things are preordained so he can't not be a fuck up, and C, he makes things worse by trying to change things and she makes things worse by trying to help him. And if you think about it, this is the biggest real life trial that we all face. Futility. From day one, our very essence is called into question. Are we worthy of life, or are we just wasting oxygen? Can we actually improve things or just make them worse? And do our efforts actually matter in the long run, or are we all the victims of futility in an indifferent universe? Miles's cosmic, fatalistic predicament might seem larger than life, but if you think about it, it's the same one you and I face. That's why it's so hard to motivate ourselves to get up in the morning and do anything with our lives, because in the back of our minds, cosmic futility is something that gnaws away at our every action. And what is Miles's reaction to that?
Fuck 'em.
Good enough for me. There's something so poignant about the fact that the only way a man can truly bond with his father is by putting a mask on. By stripping the titles of son and father, respectively, men become nothing more than comrades and are thus able to share their struggles with one another. Which segues nicely to Miles's father, who continues to get half-decent development in these movies, something stock parent figures rarely do, and it really helps to flesh him out into an actual human being, and tackle this type of hero-parent relationship, which stories tend to avoid because well, because it's difficult. Much easier to kill, sideline, or vilify the parental figure than it is to portray how the hell their relationship with their hero's son would actually develop. And the movie's definitely itching to fall into one of those habits, that's for sure. The beautiful thing about Miles' two father figures, namely Officer Davis and Uncle Aaron, is that they're the two sides of the Spider-Man coin. Uncle Aaron, yes, that's his full name, represents the vigilante aspect of Spider-Man. He's secretive, he wears a mask, operates outside the law, and is constantly pulled to the dark side. While Jeff Davis represents Spider-Man's morality, his creed. He's a cop who's sworn to protect the innocent and who chose to have a family and give back to the community. By the way, this duality of Miles is also pushed by the very final reveal of the film, in a very tangible way. And you can see where the series is going with this. Uncle Aaron died in the first one, triggering some growth in Miles, and now his father is also in danger. Fate is coming full circle, birthing the hero through the fires of sacrifice. This shouldn't be interpreted as the loss of these two sides within the hero, but the internalizing of them as a vow to live by, forever etched into the hero's soul. To which, of course, Miles says no, and tries his damnness to stop it. And with regards to that, hope is even more of a theme than in the previous movie. Gwen ends up reconnecting with her father. Miles manages to escape the literal fate police. He still has allies that help him in small ways. His father is, as of yet, not dead. In Tune with the Spider-Verse was a whimsical adventure undercut by tragedy, while Across the Spider-Boss is a fatalistic losing battle undercut by hope. The two complete each other, forming a nice whole, while also bringing distinct things to the table, making it difficult to compare the two and figure out which one is better. Have I mentioned that it's an impossible question? This is a bit of a plot hole. The first one made a big point of showing that spider people can sense one another. And even here, Gwen senses when Miles is in the wrong universe, yet she can't sense him lurking 1 foot next to her. I guess you could explain it away as Miles' invisibility having evolved to the next level, which indeed is the case in certain comics where even other spider people can't sense him when he's in this state. So you could definitely explain it that way if you really wanted to, but the movie makes no such efforts, so I won't either. The jokes definitely land. It's not just that the movie's funny, but Spider-Verse humor is very authentic to the Spider-Man character. A PG collection of snarky gags and remarks peppered with some slapstick and deadpan that bubble together into an endlessly enjoyable cocktail of fun. Its humor is a natural extension of its visuals and tone, which are a natural extension of the character of Spider-Man itself, and there are few IP that can pride themselves on this kind of authenticity. In the context of Spider-Verse, Spider-Man's biggest advantage remains the fact that there's more than one of him or her, an advantage that, of course, gets shot full of steroids in this one, pulling off jokes and gags that you literally cannot pull with just one webhead. And it highlights what we already knew about jolly, wisecracking superheroes like Spidey and Deadpool, the fact that they do best in a group setting with other characters to play off of. And what better characters to bounce off of than more spider people? Speaking of, the character that Miles doesn't get to play off of as much this time around is Peter B. Parker, who has graduated to full-time pouch-mounted baby-carrying dad bod like he's a once decapitated Cerberus. I only now realize just how much Peter B. Parker made the first movie. No shade on Miles, but you can feel Pete's absence from this one. His ginormous wit permeates into the Spider-Verse and ties it all together. And beyond that, you have a very effective master and student relationship. And beyond that, you have Peter's own parenting arc that he's struggling with and that gets tied to Miles' arc, and they both get neatly resolved. The movie really does play out like a bunch of multiversal people interwoven, yes, puns, and resolved by each other's strands of fate. Peter's screen time is cut a little bit shorter now, presumably to let Miles take center stage, which is a pretty precarious position given that most of the charm of the first one came from him. But the second one holds its own without him, if only just. The second one is also a bit more complex, with more moving parts, and ends up feeling a bit disjointed at times because of it. So the first one's plot, pacing, and overall flow is tighter than a virgin's bunghole, while the second one's thematic content is a bit more nuanced than its predecessor's rather childish shonen-style I'm gonna be a Hokage and roll with the big boys someday ambitions. In fact, Across the Spy on Her verse is the complete reversal of the first one, as Miles reaches the big leagues and instantly decides he doesn't want to be there, which again mirrors real life quite a bit, as our expectations rarely match or indeed even come close to reality. And this theme is constantly echoed throughout the film, from Gwen revealing her identity only to get burned for it, to Miles begging his parents to let him shoot for the big leagues only to regret it later, to Miguel thinking he could be a father without causing a universe's meltdown. In many ways, Spider-Verse 2 is more of a coming-of-age story than the first one, because it's littered with cautionary tales, be careful what you wish for signs, and the stench of dead childhood infects every corner of the film. And because Spider-Man interacting with Spider-Man is the best kind of interaction, the film 1000x's this concept and does it brilliantly too. The chase sequence involving involving all the Spider-Men and women is one of the most genius set pieces in any movie or animation to date. Absolutely brilliant from start to finish and infinitely rewatchable.
If he turns the machine on again, everything you know will disappear. Your family, everyone, everywhere.
Which he did. So, foreshadowing? Music is, as in the first one, exquisite, used as more than just an accompaniment track, but rather as a way to enhance the experience and dial your already innervated senses to 11, as it should. Few films and animations understand this. The Spider-Verse scores not only act as a living organ, a heart that beats in sync with the visual side of the movie, but they also have their own sound, a rarer and rarer thing nowadays, and something I lament constantly, for Hollywood is increasingly formulaic when it comes to their movie plots, sure, but even more so in the score department. Every score sounds the same, so it's nice to hear one that's so distinctive that you instantly know what multiverse you're in when you hear it. And both films are absolutely neck and neck in this department. Nothing to debate here. Move along. A couple points will be subtracted for it suffering from the Dune 2021 Part 1 and Matrix Reloaded problem of being essentially an unfinished story with a bunch of unresolved character arcs, and a huge blue ball of an ending. And by ending, I mean one big to be continued, of course, but that's the price you pay for serial storytelling. Much like my assessment of Spider-Man 2's somewhat off-putting power loss arc, this isn't a criticism of Across the Spider-Verse, but rather an acknowledgement of its nature. This also means I can't really critique it properly until Part 3 comes out. Actually, The Matrix Reloaded is probably the best comparison I can make because it follows the film's structure and guidelines to a T. Give people more of what they liked about the first one, perhaps a little too much every now and then, bloat the runtime just a little bit, and delay most of the plot developments and revelations till the last second, then cut to black, which creates all the exhilaration and frustration that you'd expect by the end. For whatever reason, Into the Spider-Verse achieves more emotional resonance. Probably because all of Across the Verse's payoff and catharsis are locked off behind a to-be-continued screen. Because of its nature as an in-betweequel, a cross between a film and a comic has the unenviable task of being both an unfinished story and being a darker, more Empire Strikes Back middle child of the trilogy. Therefore, most of its emotional moments involve feeling progressively worse and worse, because things get progressively more fucked and fucked. And while I'm one of the biggest junkies when it comes to fucked up stories, this limitation means that Into Her Spider-Purse, despite her curse, gives you just more feels for your buck. So in my completely subjective brain, it wins by default here. In summary, Across the Spider-Verse innovates in the visual and sound departments, taking action, stunts, wit, and spectacular moments to the next level without really evolving the character and storytelling side much. Which is nothing to complain about, but I do hope it's something Part 3 will work on at least a little bit. Put another way, the series is extremely aware of its strengths and places all its chips on them in this second installment. Put another way, story and characterization are the same, everything else got better. Ultimately, posing the question of which Spider-Verse is better is somewhat silly, because these films serve completely different functions while also being just connective tissue in a larger story. Put another way, they're at once too different and too similar to be compared. However, I do hate when a video poses a question only to cop out at the end and not actually answer it, so I will say that if I had to choose, gun to my head, I would say I prefer Into the Spider-Verse over its sequel. And preference is the right word for it, for at the end of the day, both of these are stellar movies that deserve your attention. As for where to put it in my little old tier list, this might shock you, but I think I'll actually... Well, here we are. Now that the casual viewers saw themselves out, we can have a little chat. If you're new here, welcome. They call me Warlock. No, not the World of Warcraft class. I get that a lot. More like the class in general. Closer to the D&D version than anything. Sort of. Not quite. Anyway, I've been thinking about this for a while now. This is a very experimental channel, obviously. Like, one week I'll be posting a video game review, then the next week one about superheroes, then a very serious video. Some videos are short and comedic, others are overly serious long video essays. I basically post about any and everything that I consider to be interesting, and the least bit creative with no rhyme or reason. And I also don't have a posting schedule, so I realized that from the outside looking in, this can seem quite frustrating, especially the posting part, because sometimes you get regular videos and other times you wonder if the channel is even still alive. So I suppose I should take the time to detail the future of this channel for whomsoever's interested, or even the fact that there is a plan to begin with. I've broken this down into 3 phases. Currently we're in what I would call phase 1 of my channel's life cycle. Each new phase adds different types of content to the mix, while retaining all the general stuff that you like about the channel, and is also characterized by a pretty big visual shift, which I won't won't spoil. The cool thing though is that we're at the tail end of Phase 1 and Phase 2 is just around the corner. And what I can tell you is that it'll involve making things around here a bit more lively. Hopefully. Unless I chicken out. As for Phase 3, that's way too far in the future to be thinking about now, but it is there all the same, just to make sure that the channel has direction and doesn't stagnate. As for the content itself, I realize I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here with a bazooka, since for whatever reason I adamantly refuse to niche down. I'm basically allergic to any kind of success. So one video might be about a superhero film, while the next one might cover Mass Effect, while the next one still might be seemingly being a contrarian for 30 minutes straight. There's little rhyme or reason to it, with the only through line being whatever topic happens to interest me, because at the end of the day, passion is what makes videos worth watching, not covering what you think you're supposed to cover. And my philosophy on the whole niche thing is, instead of niching down and cultivating a single audience with a single interest, in forming a very tenuous relationship at best, what I think I'm doing is cultivating multiple audiences at the same time. I'm simply cultivating a Spider-Man audience, a Batman audience, a Diablo audience, a Mass Effect one, and so on, because those are the things that I'm interested in, and that allows me to be both authentic and tap into whatever modicum of passion hides within my decrepit chest cavity. And it lets viewers who subscribe to me for thing X keep getting a slew of X's coming their way. And yeah, this is a slower process, but it's not like our time is limited and we all die someday, so what's the rush? Plus, offering more content than not is never a bad thing, and might make some peeps eventually cross-pollinate to other topics that I cover, resulting in less people sticking around for that one precarious subtopic that they came for, and more people sticking around because they eventually conclude that their brand of madness matches mine. As for what other topics you can expect me to cover going forward, those may or may not include, but are not limited to, Half-Life, Legacy of Kain, Arkham Batman, X-Men, The Matrix, maybe some Avatar The Last Airbender, and... too big a leap for me right now, but who knows? Maybe. If you twist my arm hard enough. And cover me in leeches. And dip me in radioactive waste. And then shoot me. I'll also be doing a slew of one-time videos on various movies and games that had a big impact on me, more fight scene analyses, those are fun, as well as various rewrites and reimaginings for bad stories, be it films or video games. Of course, I'll still be covering Mass Effect, Diablo, Spider-Man, and all the other stuff I'm currently doing, so as long as you have that condom-shaped bell thingy activated, you should be able to pick and choose what's relevant to you. And this goes without saying, but if you have suggestions for various videos, topics, things you'd like me to cover, don't hesitate to mention those. Doesn't mean I'll actually do them, but you never know. I have done that in the past, so I actually do listen. From time to time. But that's enough of that. Let's talk about monetizing this bitch. Cash App, Patreon, GoFundMe, AdSense, affiliate marketing, merch, sponsorships, millionaire courses, masterminds, OnlyFans, horny fans, OnlyFeet, Happy Feet. I'm only messing with you. As of this video, there are 0 monetization plans, and to be honest, I'm pretty iffy about most of the avenues. Again, allergic to success. And even if some of that shit will occur in the future, I'd have to be pretty fucking happy with the implementation. I suppose that's an assurance that whatever I do gargle out is motivated by the desire to create something cool instead of the desire to push something down your throat for monetary gain. When I didn't even plan on talking about this initially, considering how small a channel this is, the fact that I'm not doing this for money should be a no-brainer. But I decided to mention it in the end because I realized after reading some of the comments that not all people bother to look at the view or subscriber count and address me as if I'm some big shot influencer who's paid to talk shit about one thing or promote another one, when in reality they fail to understand that talking shit is my second language and comes as naturally to me as lying does to a politician. No, that's pretty much it. Although there is one more thing I'd like to do in this video. To be honest, I didn't really consider making subscriber specials until recently because they tend to be non-videos that hold little value to the average viewer, and most of these devolve into the content creator talking about themselves too damn much and overstating their importance all of a sudden like they just caught a spot on Oprah or something. However, any successful shindig will make it obvious that the party isn't really about the host. It's about the guests, for the party quite literally would not exist without them. In that same way, this channel would quite literally not have gotten to 1,000 subscribers without you crazy-ass people that kept coming back video after video, cheering, frolicking, shouting from the rooftops all the words of encouragement that you could muster. And it occurred to me that, even though I put your names at the end of every video and replied to all your comments, I never really acknowledged you verbally. So let's do that. In no particular order, let's kick it off with Knight 1029384756. Yes, that's his real name. Gotta make sure you get every single numerical key on the keyboard. A stoic, armor-clad protector of the innocent and a fellow Mass Effect nut like myself, who actually has some engaging content about the series on his channel. Also a person I can always have a good conversation with about most of the stuff I post, despite it not always being his wheelhouse. Sean London, a southern metalhead, composer, woodworker, and all-around masculine badass. With an even bigger penchant for words than I. Definitely a writer in there somewhere. Sean is the kind of guy you want next to you when shit eats the... Did I say eats? When shit eats the fan, yes, we'll go with that. I always pictured Sean to be the last survivor of a zombie apocalypse, I Am Legend style, armed to the teeth, casually shotgunning anything that lunges his way. A man of honor and principles, and one I've exchanged many life stories with. Also a Mass Effect fan. Cow King. A towering, muscular bovine lording over a harem of cow bitches. At least that's what I picture. Cow King is also a mainstay in my comment sections. A big fan of Diablo games, he loves watching all of my Diablo-related content, and then goes the extra mile and tortures himself with the rest of my videos for reasons unknown, perhaps even to him. Fun fact, after me making fun of Diablo 3 and he not taking it too well, I assumed I'd gotten rid of him, yet bit by bit, a bit of kinship started to form and mutual respect prevailed. Silent Rocco, a true artist who makes some of the most creative videos I've seen, and also writes some insightful addendums to my videos. By the way, reading the comments of a mime feels like him beaming his thoughts into my brain by staring at my forehead. One of the OGs on the channel, your continued support and your cool edits are an inspiration. Cheers. Anoni Send, a father, film enthusiast, and a pretty intelligent, articulate man. That's a running theme here. Guess I'm attracting the right crowd. Anoni, I might be butchering most of these names by the way, he's a guy who knows how to communicate his opinion without being beholden to it, and is open to having said opinion changed, two qualities that are increasingly scarce online. He also understands, more so than anyone else, the value of expressing appreciation for one's work, for he never once fails to compliment something, anything about a video, be it a joke, a perspective, a bit of editing, which makes me suspect he's a very empathetic person in real life, or sympathetic, or both. Kids probably help in that regard. So documentary was terrifying. Speaking of kids, he's quite good at raising them from what I gather, as he resists the urge to color his children's opinions about films that he himself may not like, and just lets them make up their own minds. Darth News. This man is a legend. He supported my channel back when it had just a handful of subs, while his channel was about 100 times larger and had a very dedicated fan base. I think he single-handedly got me about 50 subs, if not more, just by relentlessly directing his viewers to my channel.
And I was really happy about that. You don't get that every day.
And even about a year and 4 quadrillion combined views across multiple channels later, he still finds the time to sometimes comment on the odd video. Look, Darth, I think I speak for all of us here when I say, fuck you. Incubasi. Incubasi's batshit crazy. In a good way. He's an eccentric, sardonic, humorous, self-proclaimed member of the spectrum, and the rare non-straight person who nonetheless hates non-straight relationships in movies because of the shit way they're portrayed. Definitely one of my earliest subscribers, and definitely the most enthusiastic, never missing an opportunity to liven up the comment section with some decidedly not PC jokes, some of which are legit hilarious. His prose is about as intelligible as a tax return that's been gobbled up by a paper shredder, but has become sort of engaging to decipher the Mesopotamian hieroglyphs that are his own personal brand of grammar. I haven't heard from him in a while, so I doubt he'll see this, but he's definitely worth a mention. Hope you're doing well, Ink. Marius. A Diablo, Cyberpunk, Mass Effect, and StarCraft fan, which is a rare combo and guarantees that by the time the next Ice Age comes around, we still won't run out of things to talk about. In addition, we kinda just went past the pleasantry phase and started exchanging snark on our first interaction like we've known each other for decades, which is, needless to say, pretty fucking rare. He's also, by all accounts, a much savvier gamer than I, and tends to have interesting gameplay ideas about a lot of these titles. Some shit ones too. Jiggly Puff Puff. Speaking of snark, this one never fails to segue into a dick joke from every one of my videos. Extremely funny and always puts a smile on my otherwise mouthless face. Also presumably likes to puff the magic dragon every once in a while. How's that for dick jokes? Nagramore Ziggs, aka Dungeon Mastermind. Sorry, I'm giving away all your aliases. A D&D enthusiast and probably the only person who gets my Neverwinter Nights references, Nagramore lost his mind one day and decided to buy the Cynical Warlock Warlock domain for me and mailed the credentials as a gift. I mean, who do you think you are? Jesus? In all honesty, that is, to date, one of the most humbling gestures ever directed at me, and I'm forever grateful for it. And of course, when Hot Dog Swim, a relative newcomer, but I had to include this mad lad who waited for the opportune moment to become the one and only 1000th subscriber now and forever. Well played. Well played. Honorable mentions include Starts Official, Rhonda Rogers, Cherry Jones, M11W, Riches, Void Comics, Kita Sarthria, Jane Shepard, Vagrant Art Gaming, Shinka Kenshi, Optimistic Oracles, Gabriel Stigarian, and everyone else who helped build this channel up. Thank you all. Truly. Now get the fuck out.